Christian Hannah Horror.
Friday the 13th is arguably the most favorited horror franchise in the world. When I'm out in the wild myself, I find more Friday the 13th fans more than anything. Now, I'm not saying it's the biggest, but it's definitely arguably one of them. But what's interesting is that the Friday the 13th fanatics, all of us, seem to have different favorite movies. It's funny, but it's a good thing when you think about it. That's why I think this franchise has sustained for so long and has the adoration that it does. Every film has its fan base, and some of them have dedicated fan bases. And what's really going to be interesting was, what are the worldwide favorites? What are some of the movies in the franchise that transcend and resonate to people around the world? You know, because I watched a lot of rankings, and a lot of them are done by people like me in the USA, but I wanted to get somebody that was not from here, so I got my buddy Slasher Pepper to give me his top 3 favorite Friday the 13th films, and I'm going to give you my top 3, and the great thing about mine is they're always changing, and that's not because I'm just a flip-flopper, it's just that these movies evolve within you. They change when you meet the actors, they change when you read a story about the movie, they change when you notice things, and when they hit you at certain points in your life. That's what's so great about this franchise. So I'm going to give you my top 3, and I'm going to have Slasher Pepper give you his top 3, and see which films kind of had that strong sustain across the world. And this is a small example. It's not going to be the end-all be-all, but it's an interesting idea to do, so I figured why not? Let's do this. Let's head over to Slasher Pepper and find out his third favorite Friday the 13th film.
Thank you, Christian Hannah, for having me over on the show. It was very hard for me to pick my number 3 because I basically love all of these movies. Like my number 1 and 2 are obvious to me. There's no doubt about those. But my number 3 does shift around a lot, and because I mean, I love Jason X, like sue me. I mean, everybody hates it, but I really like it. I honestly like Takes Manhattan too. I really dig Part 3, Part 5, A New Beginning. That one is severely underrated. New Blood. So basically, I like every one of these movies, and it was very hard for me to pick one of them to be on the number 3 spot here. But without further ado, my number 3 is gonna be Friday the 13th Part 2. This is the first movie with Jason. Like, I know Jason is mentioned in Part 1 and is actually shows up in the end, like, but it's just a dream, or is it? That's like the question. But here he really shows up and really starts killing all the people. And that's great. That's one of the reasons why I love this one so much. This is the beginning of Jason we all know and love. Although this is still second Jason, but that's another reason I totally love it, because I love the look of Jason in this film. I don't prefer the SAG hat over the hockey mask, but I do really like the SAG hat. And Steve Dash is an amazing Jason. Now Ginny, the final girl, played by Amy Steele, is undoubtedly my favorite final girl in any Friday the 13th movie. She's awesome. She's definitely one of the strongest final girls Friday the 13th franchise has ever seen. So that's a major plus. This movie also has one of my favorite kills ever with the wheelchair kill, which is honestly really sad and honestly horrible kill by Jason, but I love it for that, and everybody loves it in horror community.
Okay, so there's Slasher Pepper's number 3. So here we go with my number 3, because it's going to be interesting, because this movie has never been high on my lists in the past. I gotta tell ya, this movie has grown on me, and it's the little things. I've been listening to the soundtrack of this movie, and listening to the songs from this movie, and becoming even more of a fan of Tom Matthews, because he's such a great human being. I've got small issues with this movie, but they're petty. I'm just not a huge fan of Jason's look in the film. But to say that Friday the 13th Part 6 is not one of the best made would be a lie to me. It's just done with its own personality. Tom McClellan, to me, was way ahead of his time with what he was doing, making the characters a little bit smarter than usual. Having a group of kids in this movie, which was different from Friday the 13th, the final chapter, because we've got this group of kids here, and they're kind of cute, and you love the little kids, and they're innocent, but there's funny moments with the kids where you say, that's pretty good. There's moments where you hear the kids say fun things that I can remember being like that when I was a kid, so what were you gonna be when you grew up? Alice Cooper is a hero of mine. He's one of my favorite musicians in the world. He inspires me every day to write new music. And to see his music in this movie, it really doesn't get much better than that. The Man Behind the Mask is arguably one of the coolest rock songs ever, especially in a horror movie. Tom Matthews is a big reason that this film has grown and grown in my passion over the years. I just think Tom Matthews was the only man to carry the torch for Tommy Jarvis. I do like The Shepherd Gentleman in Part 5, but Tom Matthews he's a guy you just get behind no matter what he's doing. It'd be hard to ever boo or be against Tom Matthews in a movie. He just has that resonance that makes you get behind his character. So yes, part 6 has grown on me, and some people will be very happy to hear that because they think I'm nuts for not loving part 6, and I do love part 6. I gotta give it to part 6. It really is good. Let's go over to Slasher and find out his number 2 favorite Friday the 13th film.
So my number 2 is gonna be Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, which isn't the final chapter, but it is still a great movie because Ted White is an amazing Jason, the music is really good, the soundtrack, and the look of Jason is also really good. Now, I really can't say anything about this movie that hasn't already been said, and I just love it.
So there you have that, guys, the final chapter for Slasher Pepper. Now for me, on the other hand, my number 2, well, I'll just say this, that there's a man with no life in his eye. That's right, guys, Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. You know, this film, it's funny, I can't always put it into words. I love the look, the sound, the weirdness of this movie. I love Roy Burns' character. I love Reggie the Reckless. He's got to be one of my favorite Friday the 13th characters in the entire franchise. Now here's a little kid with some spunk and some style. Are you afraid of spiders on strings? You know, you a one scared cat. Like, I just love the lines that he delivered in this movie. Reggie the Reckless was one of the most fun characters in the franchise, and that red suit he wore, obviously I'm wearing a red shirt today, in lieu of Reggie the Reckless, because he's just that funny to me. I love his character, and that scream he does. You know, Friday the 13th A New Beginning is not a movie I take seriously, and I don't think you need to, or you should have to. It's clearly meant to be, in today's day and age, looked at as, you know, a funny entry, and just a weird entry. But you know what? When this film gets serious, it gets serious. The kills in this movie are, for the most part, fairly simple, but it's the attack in these kills that just really get me. You see that butcher knife in the air and that swing. God, it was so forceful and brutal. I don't know. It's the way it was done. I just love it. There's a different element to this film that's not in the other ones, and some would call it sleaze, some would call it just whatever, and that's not an argument. I don't think that's wrong, but I don't know. I just think Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning is an animal of its own, and for that, I just absolutely love it. Let's go over to Slasher Pepper and find out his number 1.
So coming on number 1 is gonna be Jason Lives. This is my favorite Friday the 13th movie, and that's because I love C.J. Graham as Jason. He's my favorite Jason of all of them. The look of Jason is great. A lot of people hate this look or don't like it, but I really dig it. This is actually my favorite look. This is actually my favorite look, and the soundtrack is amazing. That's probably the best part of this film. Like, the music that's played in like intense sequences is great, but also the soundtrack by Alice Cooper, or the song I'm No Animal by Felony, that also did that song in Graduation Day that's played way too loud. The soundtrack is really awesome. I'm a big fan of Alice Cooper. Really, that's all I have to say, and I'll give Christian the word to do the outro for this video. So I'll see you on the next top 3 on this channel.
So there you go, guys. That's one film already in both of our lists, which is really interesting. So here we go with my number 1, and you guys are not going to be surprised with this. It's what I consider to be one of the greatest slasher movies ever, Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. I've said a lot about this movie, and I'm going to spare you guys. You guys know how I feel about this movie. I just think it's perfect. I think it's one of those movies that really exemplifies what slasher movies were. Having multiple teenage characters in a movie, some of them you're supposed to love, some of them you're supposed to hate, and it does that very well. Now, Jason in this movie is just absolutely brutal. I love Ted White. The story behind the movie is what adds to the elements that I think just makes me love this film so much. Ted did not like this movie. He was in a bad mood. He didn't like Corey Feldman. He was angry, and that's what Jason was in this movie. Angry. So there you have it, guys. This is just so interesting. There's 2 films in both of our lists that were the same. Now, as I said, this is not the end-all be-all. I'm not saying that The Final Chapter and Jason Lives are the biggest contenders in the world of Friday the 13th. Of course not. But I wanted to see just the dichotomy of his and my list, because it's interesting to see which films have that extra layer of love that other films don't. And my list is always changing, as I'm sure Slasher Peppers is always changing too. I know he's a big fan of Jason X, and I like Jason X too. But there you have it, guys. A fun video to do. It's always fun to talk about this man right here, Friday the 13th. It's a great franchise. I love it, and I don't know what I would do without it. It's, you know, Jason, it's different with Jason, guys, because, you know, with, like, Michael, I still see him as an evil villain. But Jason's like an old buddy. You just love seeing him on screen. At least I do. And I could not imagine a horror world without the Friday the 13th franchise. We owe so much to it. So thank you guys for watching this video. Go ahead and check out Slasher Pepper's channel. He's a very good friend of mine, and I want you guys to subscribe to his channel. Check him out. He's a good guy. Also, be sure to subscribe to me if you come across this video by chance, and hit the subscribe button. It only takes a second. Also, check out my Patreon. I've got great stuff on that, and my Teespring. You can rock Christian Hannah horror gear. Thank you guys for watching, and go watch a Friday the 13th.